I think the thing about forensics is the more you learn, the more you realize how much you don't know, because there is just there are so many specialties within the digital forensics area.
You are a warrior.
321 status.
What kind of vehicle is it?
You are the very best your nation has to offer.
911.
Multiple shots fired.
They're asking you to lead.
5. We need a Bearcat.
It's up to us.
So 133. I need somebody that's got a visual on where the shooter is.
You must be sound in mind, body, and spirit.
42, where's the officer down? I have a rescue helicopter that wants to land and help.
This is the podcast that will make you the one.
Copy running eastbound.
The one that will bring everyone back.
I believe we have shots fired. Give me backup now.
Because no one else is coming.
I'm going to have an officer shot. 100 block of East Street.
Suspect is down.
This is the Squad Room.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Squad Room podcast, where we learn how to serve, strive, and succeed in our challenging careers as first responders. On this show, we cover the tactics and strategies you can use to lead with vision, honor your oath, and take care of your mind and your body, and be the one in someone else's time of need. My name is Garrett Teslaw. I'm a full-time sergeant for our sheriff's office in Southern California, and with this show and with my life and with everything else I'm doing, I'm on a mission to build a world where first responders wake up inspired, feel confident at work, and go home safe knowing they've spent their time in a worthy cause. That might sound silly. I repeat it every show. I repeat it to myself every day. It's the screensaver on my computer. It literally is why I'm here. I've decided that is where my flag is planted, because that is how we change things. That is how we improve our lives at work. It's how we improve our lives at home. It's how we improve ourselves internally. And it's how we lead into the next generation. All of that wrapped up in one sentence. Is that preposterous? Yes. Do I still believe it? Absolutely. So that's why I say it every episode, to remind you and to remind me why we're here. All right, before we get to our guest, I want to remind you real quick, make sure you're following us on social media and that you're a member of our Facebook group. There's exclusive content that goes out on social media that's not shared elsewhere. There's exclusive content in the Facebook group that goes out there that's not shared elsewhere. And also, make sure you're on our Tactical Tuesday mailing list. Our mailing list gets exclusive content as well. Stuff that is shared in the mailing list that is not part of the podcast, that is not on social media. And every Tuesday, I put out a weekly email with tips, tactics, and strategies that I find useful. Maybe an inspiring quote, a book I want to share, a documentary I think you could get something out of, training videos of law enforcement actions, lots of different stuff. You can sign up at thesquadroom.net/Tactical Tuesdays, or just text your email address and name to 805-364-2331. If you didn't get that, don't worry about it. If you're driving around, don't worry about it. You can check the show notes. You can get it there if you didn't catch the phone number. All right, my guest today. My guest is Pete James. Pete was a lieutenant, or he retired as a lieutenant for the Sacramento County Sheriff's Office here in California. Pete spent a lot of his career in forensics investigations, or digital forensics, computer crimes, that sort of stuff. And he now runs officerprivacy.com. And fully upfront, officerprivacy.com is a sponsor of the show. They've given me incredible support. I use their service. I use what they do to scrub my name from the internet, which can be incredibly difficult when you have a podcast that's heard all over the world, to ask a company to scrub your name. But we talk about that. We talk about what you can and can't get rid of, because realistically, your stuff is out there. There's a lot of information about you out there, whether you know it or not. But what Pete's mission is now is to help make your life safer by getting rid of the low-hanging fruit and the stuff that criminals can use to find your address, to find your family members, all those things. And we talk about some of the misconceptions about this kind of work, because there's a lot of companies out there that do this. Some, I'd say less than ideal characters might suggest that they can remove you from the internet. That's absolutely not true. Pete explains why that's just a false promise, but there is a lot you can do. And I think it's important enough to take control of your privacy in this way that it's worthy of the conversation. And there's enough nuance to it that I thought there was some value in having Pete come on. This was not a planned part of his sponsorship of the show. It was not something we talked about when that happened. This came about just because we talk every so often and we talk about these things. And my goal is to, again, find those tips, tactics, and strategies to make your life better. And sometimes better also means safer. And after two incidents in my agency that I talk about during the interview, 2 incidents, very scary incidents where partners were encountered at their homes. I thought this was valuable information to have. You can check out his work at officerprivacy.com. And if you sign up for their service, use the link officerprivacy.com/the squad room, and you'll get a free USB data blocker and 1 month of free monitoring when you sign up. And we'll put the links again in the show notes as well. So here we are with Pete James of officerprivacy.com.
Thanks, Garrett. Thanks so much for having me on your show.
Yeah, I'm excited to have you. I don't know, known each other. Is that the right word nowadays? I really don't know. With COVID and everything else going on, like when the way we all meet each other these days seems to be almost exclusively online in some way, because nobody gets to see anyone face to face anymore, at least, at the time that we quote unquote met. Mm-hmm. So we met online. We kind of run in the same world, as it were, and got to talking. And I was really intrigued by not only your career, but then what you're doing in retirement. And I don't know why retirement jobs have been on my mind recently, or not retirement, but like that second career, or that's whatever you call it. I don't know what you call it, but so let's start with the first career, though. I want to share with everybody a good sense of who you are and what you've done. I think you've got a really interesting and unique story. And so let's start with the fact that, when I say retired, you retired from law enforcement. So let's start with, like, where did you grow up, and what was your hometown like?
Well, I grew up in California. I ended up living in a few cities up and down California. I actually left for the Navy at 17 and spent a few years living on an aircraft carrier. And after that, I ended up landing in Sacramento. I started with the Sacramento Sheriff's Department and did 25 years with them. So it was a good career. It was a good department.
You did your whole career at Sacramento Sheriff's?
Yes, my whole law enforcement career at Sacramento Sheriff's Office.
In 25 years, when I started my career, I thought, man, that 25 years is such a long time. And then as you get closer to that mark, you realize it just goes by so fast. We have some mutual friends over at Sac Sheriff's, a great agency. What are the kinds of things you did in those 25 years to fill up that time?
So I spent about a third of my career in our jails, a third of my career in patrol, and then a third in investigations. When I was in, I did promote a couple times. So each time you promote, you end up, rolling back to the jail, and then from there I'd roll back out to patrol. Toward the end of my career, though, I started working digital forensics cases. So that was my initial post-retirement career. I liked doing forensics, and I enjoyed that. So when I left, I worked as a consultant for about 5 years, worked for several different companies doing computer forensics on the civil side. So intellectual property theft, inappropriate behavior with digital devices, a lot of divorces.
It's one thing that I don't think of because I'm in the world, but something I thought was worth mentioning to people, especially lots of areas of the East Coast and even in other countries. But I often get asked, what's the difference between a sheriff's office and a police department? And I always answer that there's really none, other than that the sheriffs are responsible for the county jails. And there are municipalities that have municipal jails, but they're few and far between. So the majority of jails are run by county sheriff's departments. But here in California and most of the West, sheriff's offices are also fully staffed or fully functioning law enforcement agencies, right? They have
Hmm.
patrol, like you mentioned. They have investigations, like you mentioned. They have air units and detectives and school resource officers, and they're responsible for the unincorporated areas that aren't covered by a municipality. Now, 99% of my audience already knows that, but I've even found cops on the East Coast where it's more traditional, where a sheriff's department and Denver PD is like this, for example. The sheriff's jurisdiction lines and the city jurisdictions lines are the same, the county and city. So the sheriff's office only handles jail, maybe some parks, uh, but they don't have some of those fully staffed resources. But I mean, Sac Sheriff's one of those big agencies that you got everything, right? You're a one-stop
Absolutely.
shop.
Absolutely. All law enforcement responsibilities. We covered the airport, the courthouse. Yeah,
Oh
we
yeah,
had an
bailiffs. Yeah,
aero detail, SWAT team. Um,
and it's a big area and a big agency. Roughly how many deputies do you have there?
I believe our staffing is somewhere around 2,000. I don't think all of those are sworn, but I
Mhm.
think we're somewhere around there.
No small agency, right? So
Correct.
you started. Almost everybody who starts for a sheriff's office starts in the jail, and you eventually work your way towards patrol. And you mentioned promoting. Um, Walk me through that promotion navigation. How did you, or when did you promote into what rank?
Yeah, so I started in 1989, which was kind of interesting because right after that, I remember 1990, 1991 is when we had the Rodney King incident. So it was,
Yeah,
uh, that was a big deal for us, even though what was happening was in Southern California. We of course
you
were
felt
watching
it.
it. Hmm. Yeah, so I did my time in the jail. I rotated out, worked patrol for several years. I ended up promoting to sergeant, going back to the jail, rolled back out to patrol as a patrol sergeant. From there, I actually went to our POP team, our problem oriented policing team,
Hmm.
was a supervisor there, and then moved over to detectives. So I was a detective sergeant for many, many years. And from there, I ended up promoting to lieutenant, of course, going back to the jail for a few months, and then rolling back out to patrol, where I was a patrol watch commander. Uh, when I was the detective sergeant, though, that's when I started doing computer forensics. We had cases that came in that we needed that expertise, and our task force was great, uh, but they're overwhelmed. And so I went to my boss and I said, you know, can I start? Can I start taking computer forensics classes? And he's like,
Hmm.
yeah, go ahead and do it. So I did, and that was in 2010. So I started taking computer forensics classes and working those cases when they came in, and I continued that as a lieutenant. Even when I rolled back out and I was a patrol watch commander, I was still doing computer forensics for our for the contract city that I worked for, which was Rancho Cordova.
So it seems like you really took a liking to the digital forensics. I think a lot of cops, myself included, are somewhat technologically adverse. We want to press the power button and make everything work, right? We don't like to read the manual. I think that probably rings true for most cops. What was it about digital forensics that intrigued you so much?
I think the thing about forensics is the more you learn, the more you realize how much you don't know, because
Mm.
there is just there are so many specialties within the digital forensics area. And one other thing I did also is I went back to school. So I already had my bachelor's degree. And when I started taking these computer forensics classes, I was getting really detailed knowledge of forensics, what we needed to know to work these cases. But I realized I didn't have, a foundation. So I went back to community college and started taking programming classes. And so I would take these programming classes, and then I realized, I don't know if I want to be a programmer in retirement. This was 4 or 5 years pre-retirement. I knew I wanted
Mhm.
to have a plan for when I did retire. So I started taking programming classes, and then that led me to network security type classes. And then while taking those classes, it took me to information system security. So I ended up, getting another couple degrees in computer related fields. But here I am, I'm in my late 40s, and I'm going to a community college. Um, but it was well worth it. And um, so I would suggest anybody who is a few years away from retirement to start thinking about, okay, what am I going to do? Do I want to come back and work as an on-call? That's fine. Do I want to work in the, somewhere outside of law enforcement? I would say, have a 2 to 4 year plan before you retire, and start, educating yourself, start making contacts, start thinking about, what you're going to do, the day you retire, because it will sneak up on you. It happens fast. And um, it will happen. You will get there. And what you don't want is for you to all of a sudden be retired and say, okay, now what am I going to do? And then you have no plan. Now, if you don't want to do anything, that's great. If you want to hunt, fish, golf, great. But if you do want to have a second career after law enforcement, I would start prepping for it. Get on LinkedIn. 2 of the 3 jobs I got after law enforcement, I got them because I was on LinkedIn.
Really?
Yes, they found me. In the first case, a headhunter found me on LinkedIn, reached out. In the second case, a business owner found me on LinkedIn and reached out. So it doesn't have to be fancy. I would suggest having somebody else look at your LinkedIn profile, but it's really, really most important the closer you get to retirement to have a good LinkedIn profile.
What's one of the, because like, I think a lot of cops struggle with the idea of the transferable skills. It's like, I can't tell you how many firemen I know who have their own construction business on the side, or roofing or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
But, when you have a cop who thinks, okay, uh, maybe investigations, so I guess private eye, digital forensics is one of the cleaner ones, or one of the more obvious paths, right, of
Mm-hmm.
skill sets that you can take out there. But, as your friends are of age now where they're retiring too, the people you went through with, and you meet people from around, the industry, so to speak, if law enforcement is indeed an industry, but you meet people, like, I'm curious, what other transferable skills, or where do you see other cops moving in that after retirement? What other jobs are they picking up that they're using those skills?
So I was also a private investigator. I did that. I went that route. And I got the license, and I belonged to some organizations, and I went to some of their meetings. And a lot of officers do that because they want to continue doing the investigations. Now, within that field, the most common is to work for a defense attorney.
Mm-hmm.
And if that's what you want to do, that's fine. I did not want to do that, so I didn't. Um, and but you can still do that type of work. But like anything else, you got to go out and hustle. You got to make it happen. You got to make the contacts. Sometimes you take a loss on the front end so you can get the benefit at the tail end. I saw quite a good number of former law enforcement officers become private investigators and running a business, and that's nothing like law enforcement. It is
The
a
running the
total
business part?
right. It is a totally different skill set, especially today in today's digital age. Completely different skill set, and it's you got to work to get the work.
So one of the things, so I mean, we're going to talk about your post law enforcement career, because that's why I think you're going to bring some value to the audience here, really. But where do you start with that? Where do you go to learn the business stuff? Have you found success with that, or are you navigating on your own, or hiring consultants, or taking classes, or what have you been doing? Because you're right, business and law enforcement are different instincts and require different skill sets.
Yeah, all of the above. Books,
Mhm.
Audible books. I constantly listening to Audible books and podcasts, and um, always, conferences. Always, there's always something new out there, and you got to stay on top of it.
Mhm.
Um, I have a really good digital forensics guy that helps me navigate that, and I run everything through him. So that's, you got to have somebody who can give you honest feedback, not just tell you, "Oh yeah, that's great, that's great." Somebody who will be brutally honest with you and say, "Yeah, that's not good.
You
That's
need a
not what we
guy.
want." You need a guy who you totally trust, and sometimes that can be a family member. Sometimes it can't be, because they'll want to be too nice to you, and they'll want to be encouraging, and they want to support you, but you need somebody who can be completely honest with you, and sometimes you have to pull that out of people.
Yeah.
They will just want to be nice and say, "Oh yeah, that looks good, that's nice, that's a great idea," but then you got to really, you got to say, "No, tell me why this isn't a good idea. What can go wrong?" you
Mhm.
know
So the reason I thought you would have something to share here with the audience is a story I have. And when we connected up, I thought of this and thought, oh yeah, more people need to be aware of this and need to know this happened. And I really would love to tell the whole story, but I think anyone understands that I have to be very careful in what details I share. But your job now is you're the owner of officerprivacy.com, which is I should probably just let you explain what that is. So let's start there, and then I'll reframe this conversation a little bit about, or pivot this conversation towards this, because of this event that happened in my own career.
Okay, so officerprivacy.com, uh, we remove your personal information from the internet so you can feel safe again. If you Google yourself, you will the Google results will show a lot of sites which expose your private information, information like your home address, your phone number, your email address, the names of your relatives. And for the average everyday person, that might be okay with them. But for law enforcement officers, it's a big problem. So we are being doxxed, we're being harassed. Protesters are showing up at our front door after an incident. So there's no good reason for any law enforcement officer to allow their home address, for example, to be open on the internet, open for anybody to see. And that's the case right now for most officers. So we exist to provide the tools and to help law enforcement officers remove their information from the internet. Now, while my primary audience are law enforcement officers, you don't have to be a law enforcement officer to use any of our services. But, you know, I did 25 years. I have a love for the profession, and this is my way of helping out.
So you mentioned the protesters in 2020 certainly put a lot of us on blast. 99% of the time it was completely unwarranted. In going after individual officers were threatened. And so the story I have predates all of that, and it's more of one of those things that could happen anywhere kind of events. And I had two partners who, in different capacities, one is a detective, one is a patrol sergeant, um, had done investigations on a particular citizen. And this guy was very not well, right? But he was like smart crazy.
Mm-hmm.
If you remember those guys from patrol days, where like they were completely off their rocker, but they could keep it together. And even to some people, they'd probably fool them. Um, they could fool the unsuspecting person, or the unsuspecting victim. And this guy fooled a whole bunch of ex-girlfriends, and as as often happens, crazy met crazy. And his girlfriend at the time was similarly imbued with those talents. Uh, but he was very active in the community too, in some ways. And so the short version of the story is that they had both arrested him or had contact with him in an enforcement manner that was at the time seemingly routine, pretty nondescript. He did have a propensity for violence and had gotten arrested on, I think, what, a restraining order violation. But he wasn't somebody on everybody's radar, at least not at the time. And in hindsight, the clue for us should have been when he started making complaints against lots of officers, and that he was sort of starting to get agitated. But that it wasn't something that was kind of peaking at the time. Anyway, on one occasion, he showed up at the front door of the patrol sergeant's home, and his wife answered the door with his young kids right there in the house. And, a scuffle kind of ensued right there on the front lawn. And luckily, the local PD came out and helped and resolved the issue. But we learned that this guy had tracked them down and had basically been stalking him for weeks, and knew everything about him prior to confronting him at the house. And he had another similar issue with one of our other officers where he, when he got arrested, tried to put a hit out on this officer. And it wasn't just jailhouse talk. It was legit, and had that officer's information as well. And both of these guys are very careful. They're not, they're certainly not out there in the world with a podcast with their name plastered all over it. Right. And so that struck me, it's always sat with me, and it's always made me aware or reminded me of the importance of being aware. And one of the things that happened after that this was years ago, my union hired a company to come in and kind of do an audit on our personal information online, and basically try and scrub us from the internet as best you can. And we'll talk about why that's basically impossible here in a second. But it gave us a sense of peace of mind, and at least we were doing something. And I think a lot of officers were shocked by what was found about them online. And for me, one of the challenges was, I didn't have the time. I had the desire to get my stuff off the internet, but I really just didn't have the time. I didn't have the knowledge. I didn't have the know-how. And it's something you need to stay up on. So, for the officer that's listening right now, there's not a lot of pros to having all your information out there, right? But what are some of the cons, or what are some of the common things the common misconceptions we have about our stuff being out there? Because people don't realize that, like, if your home is under your name, it's public record. At least in some states, or the stuff that's easy to find out about you. Like, yes, you can be followed home. That's or your license plate can be tracked or whatever. But what are the misconceptions, or what are the false safeties we have in law enforcement?
I think one of the biggest misconceptions is there's nothing you can do about it. I think that prevents a lot of people from taking any action, because they think, well, I can't be invisible, therefore I don't need to do anything. And well, that's like, well, should you not lock your front door because it can be kicked in? Should you not wear a vest because it can't stop all bullets? So getting back to your point of having the desire to be removed from these sites, there are many sites. We cover the top 30. There are many sites, and to get removed from them, each one has its own unique procedure. It's tough to, figure out how to do each one. It takes time. Then you need to track it, and then you need to follow up, because many of these sites will not remove your information the first time you ask. Sometimes you have to ask multiple times, and then over time you will get repopulated back on those sites. So getting back to your original point, what's a misconception? It is that, well, it's too much hassle, and what good does it do anyway? But that is not the case. You can get removed from these sites. To your point of being invisible, yeah, we make it clear that we can't make you invisible. Nobody can make you invisible. You are not going to be invisible. That is not possible. Our goal is to give you an extra layer of privacy. Our goal is to make you more difficult to find. We want somebody searching for you to get frustrated, to give up, to move on to the next one who doesn't who hasn't removed uh, their information.
Mm-hmm.
So um, that's what
Target hardening, as it sometimes is called, right? Like
absolutely,
harden
absolutely.
yourself as a target. Now, the one that I think everyone, you know, the one that everyone thinks of as probably the biggest leak is social media. And that's, it's kind of funny because that one's like the most, you have to be proactive in that. You have to sign up for an account. You have to be willing to put your name on it, even if it's a pseudonym. But then it's really up to us about what we share or don't share on that page. And I mean, I see pages all the time. So, some people you would never know they were a cop
Mm-hmm.
based on their photos. They don't talk about it. They don't share photos of the kids or whatever. And there's other people who it's just a personal choice, but out there in uniform, the selfie in the patrol car, you know, tagging their lunch at the place where they go to eat for lunch, and they have an open account or a public account. I mean, those are the obvious ones, right? Like we all think of those and go like, yeah, that's if privacy is important to me, then obviously I'm not going to do that. And even here at me as someone who has, public Facebook page, a large group, my personal page is locked down, but I'm even careful what I share there. Other people choose not to. So those are the obvious things we do. Instagram is the same. But what are some of the non-obvious things that we don't think about where our stuff is just out there floating around? I mean, what do we do with Google, for example?
So yes, privacy it's a personal choice, and if you don't have a problem with having your information out there, then that's your choice. For those that are concerned, I I'm all about educating yourself, figuring out what information is out there. Uh, if a protester was going to target me, what could they easily find out? And it all starts with an internet search. You can use Google, you can use Bing, you can use any search engine, but put your name in there, put quotes around it, put your name in quotes, and put the city that you live in, because somebody targeting you is likely going to know the city you live in, or at least a nearby city like your department. And then put the word address in there, and you'll be shocked to what you see. You'll see results that link back to what I refer to as people search sites that will then have a listing for you. Start there. Also, social media. Yeah, what can somebody find out about you just from an internet search, just from searching your social media? What can they find out about you? Can they find out, the name of your spouse? Can they find out the name of your kids? Are their accounts private or open? Many officers may be very mindful of their privacy and security settings on their social media sites, but if they have kids and sometimes the spouse, they're not always as privacy conscious as they are. And as an investigator, we all know that the target may be hardened, but yet the spouse wouldn't be, or the kids wouldn't be. So you use that information to figure out more about them. Yeah, where do they go eat? When did they last have a birthday? Oh, it was, little Joey's, 8-year-old eighth birthday. Well,
Mm-hmm.
now I have a date. Now I have a location. And so now I know the kid's date of birth. Same for a spouse, or, oh, my husband's, 45th birthday. Okay, well, now we have a date of birth for him because we can figure out the day this was posted and move back 45 years. So, just become aware of what information is out there, and then, take the steps that you deem necessary.
Yeah, it's another one I think of too is like, the first day of school photos that are out there with the school sign there. Like, well, now everyone knows where your kids go to school.
Mm-hmm.
And again,
Mm-hmm.
it's a choice. Like I'm not a paranoid person typically. I go through my phases, of course, like any cop, but like I intentionally sit with my back to the front door of a restaurant sometimes. Big gasp. What? And I do that specifically to fight the urge or the hypervigilance that results from that kind of attitude, right? But it's a conscious choice to kind of work against that. But in my day-to-day life, like I don't carry all the time. In fact, I rarely carry these days when I'm off duty. But we can get really lazy or maybe like lack of mindfulness about it with what we put out there on the internet. What about, I mean, you focus specifically on the people search engine sites, and why is that? Maybe let's start with that too.
Well, so these sites expose so much information about you, and they are open and free. Anybody can use them. Now, these these sites, there's a business behind them and there's a business model behind them. And the business model is to give you a little bit of free information, and then they make you pay for a more complex report. But you can pretty much find out everything or almost everything that's in these full comprehensive reports by going to multiple sites and pulling the information. So, the type of information there is going to be your home address, your past home addresses, the names of relatives. So it's going to have your parents and your spouse and maybe your kids if they're over 18. It's going to have your email addresses, your phone numbers, all of this information, your date of birth on some of these. And so the problem with that is that uh, that can be used to learn more about you. It can be used to not only showing up at your front door. So say you're not a law enforcement officer and you're not really worried about any protesters showing up at your front door, but there's also they also with all this information there, it's also easier to commit identity theft. So and hack into your account with this information. We have let's start with your relatives. So you may very well have your mother listed as one of the relatives. Well, if your mother has a profile on those sites, probably figure out her maiden name. And what's one of the common security questions for when you open an account? Your mother's maiden name. Your email addresses are listed on here. And that can be used in a couple different ways. For many of the accounts that we have to our banks or to our retirement, our other online accounts, the username. So you need a username and a password to log in. The username is often the email address. You're like, okay, well, you have half of what you need. What's the other half? Well, we've all heard about these data breaches, right? Where corporations lose. Well, part of that breach is our passwords. And what they do is they connect up your username, your email address, and a password. And there are programs where you can put potential passwords into it, and it will hit 1,000 sites within a couple seconds using a username and password. And what the hacker will do is take these passwords that they find that you've used on different sites and then use them, try and get into other accounts. That's one way to get into your account. Then, of course, once they're in your account, then what they do is, so let's say somebody is able to hack into your email account. So they have access to your email account. They're inside your email. Well, you think, okay, what's the big deal? I mean, like, okay, so I get a couple emails here and there. I get some newsletters here and there, and it's not any really big deal. But for if you have accounts that are associated with that, they go to a bank. They go to Bank of America and they do, oh, I forgot my password. I want to do a password reset. Well, it goes to the email. Now they have access to your email. Now they can go in and change your password. And they're crafty because then they'll go in and set a rule that will put any email that comes in that has the word, password reset, and they'll put it in a folder that you don't even see and mark it as read immediately. So you don't even know it. All of a sudden, your B of A password has changed. You can't get in because there's a new password. And if they're really, really smart and really crafty, which many of them are, they'll set up two-factor authentication on it, which is an extra password sent to a device. Like you've gotten text messages to your phone saying, okay, here's an extra password, or there are apps that you can have on your phone that have an extra password. That's two-factor authentication. That second factor is an extra password. They'll set up two-factor authentication on your account with their password to give them more time to do whatever they want to do with your account, like transfer money out. So and all that starts with being open and free with and having your email listed on these sites.
Jeez. It's an important point you touched on too. There is it's not just your information that's out there. All of us are out there in public in some degree. We wear name tags. We're mentioned on the news. I mean, at one point was like an acting PIO for the agency, and wrote a lot of press releases, did some on camera stuff, and so like when you search my name, you get a lot of interviews of me. But of course, then also the squad room stuff. But it's not hard at all. It probably takes 2 scrolls of the pages to find your family. And it's crazy how much information is out there about them, and they're not thinking these things. My parents certainly don't think about these same concerns. I mean, the identity theft, yes, but like they're not thinking about some crazed defendant showing up at their front door. My other family members are not in law enforcement. This is not top of mind, right? They want to protect their bank accounts, their identity for those reasons, but safety wise, it's just not something that occurs to them. But I think it's incumbent upon us as officers, when we know this exists and we know that danger is a potential there, that we educate and inform them as well, that without freaking them out, like, hey, this is a thing, and here's what I'm doing, to protect myself. Here are some easy things you can do or should do, and give them that choice too, whether they want to pursue that or not. I mean, it's got tentacles. The internet is the greatest and worst invention all at the same time. And it's just got tentacles into every part of our life like that.
Yeah. So you mentioned a spouse, and one of the other things that these protesters could do if they wanted to harm you is, we may think of, well, physically protecting our spouse, and we should consider that. The other part of that, though, is, let's say your wife has a job outside the home. She has a boss. If they can identify who your spouse is and where they work, they could make false allegations, false complaints against them, their customer service. She was rude to me. I'm never going back to your business again because she was so rude to me. So it's a way to get at you, the officer, by going and attacking the spouse. Let's say the spouse has an online business. What about bad reviews? Nobody wants bad reviews. So, having that, you want an air gap in there, right? You don't want anybody who is going to want to bring harm to you. You don't want them to find any additional information about you. And the internet makes it so easy to do that. I mean, one thing you can do is, if you are an officer and you're on social media, and I laugh when I say it, but unfriend your spouse.
Yeah.
If you're an investigator and you're gonna, put your investigator hat on and say, okay, I want to find about everything I can about Garrett.
Mm-hmm.
What are you going to do? Well, you're going to go to social media. You're going to go to the internet. You're going to try and figure out, okay, well, what's his wife's name? What are his kids' name? Where does the wife work? What social media accounts does the wife have? Same for the kids. And then, you just start growing, and then, you use that method. Okay. You're not going to go after Garrett because Garrett's hardened, right? Can't find much about him, but all I got to do is find his wife. How do I find his wife? You find his wife, and then you find additional information, and then you go from there. So that's why I always say, as an officer, educate yourself, search for yourself as a hacker would, as an attacker would. Uh, Start with no knowledge other than a name and a city, because you're going to know the city, and see what you can figure out. And don't stop just at Google. Go to social media sites, and look for them as, now you're not going to, don't use any law enforcement databases. I'm not talking about doing that, but
Yes,
just,
please don't do that. Don't do
yes,
that.
yeah, don't do that. But, because the criminals, I mean, they shouldn't have access to that either. So, you got to think just the basic internet, but do some crafty searches and see what you can figure out, and, or have a friend do it. Have a
You
friend
shared
do
with
it.
me. You shared with me the five. I think it was the five most used sites for finding people's names. What are those?
Yeah, the most popular sites, and this is based on web traffic: White Pages, Spokeo, Been Verified, My Life, and Instant Checkmate.
Okay. Oh gosh, it's yeah, it's scary. So and I'm someone who, I remember I didn't get hired by a particular agency, in part, or at least the excuse they used, I guess, now that I think about it. But at the time, I was told, "Oh, your background's just too complicated. You've moved around a lot. We need more time to finish it." And I got picked up where I am now. In the interim, actually, kind of a funny story. I got pushed back and said, "Yeah, your background's too complicated. We need more time, etc." In the interim to that, my agency picks me up, puts me through that other agency's academy, because we don't have our own, puts me through their academy, and I'm about, I don't know, 8 weeks into the academy when I get the job offer from them, and I have to go march into the office and decline the offer because I'm in their academy for someone else. Felt kind of good, actually. Anyway, those sites, and I totally lost my train of thought when I told that story. But the sites that we use, and this is the part, because of my background. Sorry, because I grew up out of state. I bounced over to New York City for a while. I was living in Los Angeles. I bounced around Los Angeles, different jobs, and so yeah, I'm like a smattering all over the place. But it may be more confusing online for some of my stuff. When I did my search, it was less clear where I was currently. But if you knew where I was, knew the agency I worked for, you knew the town, it wasn't that hard to find out information about me. And it wasn't until I was able to do that kind of swipe where stuff was a lot harder to find. So, I want to make sure that our officers who are listening are getting, some key points out of this. What is it that you do at officerprivacy.com, and then what are the things they can do on their own, other than, they go out and search these sites, but you have some tools for them to help them do this, whether they hire you to do it or not, just to help them do it. Explain what they can do to take like an immediate action step towards protecting this information.
Yeah. So we have both paid and free plans. And the paid plan is where you go to our site, you sign up, you fill out one simple form, you send it in, and we do the rest. You don't have to do anything else after that. Our staff, we are all current or former law enforcement officers. We're all based here in the US, and we will remove your information from the top 30 sites, and then we monitor. You will show up again. When you show up again, we remove you again. So that's our premium plan. We also offer a free plan. So I had software created and built so that we could go through and do this quickly. This software I make available for free. you can use the software free for 14 days. If you need it longer than that, it's $9.99 a month. I also recommend that you keep that because you will want to go back to those sites and check them again because you will get re-added to them, and you can then remove yourself using this software. So if you go to officerprivacy.com, if you want to do it yourself, we offer you access to our quick removal software. You have links to the top 30 sites. We have instructions for removing your information from each one of those sites. And then we have a way to keep tracking it all, keep track of it. So you don't have to have an Excel spreadsheet or a bunch of Post-it notes, keeping track of which sites that you're on and which sites that, you need to follow up on. So those are the products that we have. I make that available free. The access to the quick removal software is free for 14 days. You should be able to knock through it in about an hour or an hour and a half, maybe. And you can go through each one of those sites and remove your information. I will tell you though, just to give your listeners a few more tips, and these are all this information here that I'll share with you. If you sign up for the access to the quick removal software, I have help documents, and one of the help documents is tips for quickest removal, and what I'll explain next is already included in there. So you have access to this, but I already shared the most popular sites, but I'll share also with your listeners the sites that will remove your information immediately. So if you want that immediate satisfaction of getting removed right away, the sites that will remove your information immediately are Cluster Maps, Truth Finder, Nuber, and it's Nuwber, Radaris, and Spy Dialer. Those sites will remove your information immediately.
Excellent. Now you have a free ebook too that I think has a lot of great tips in it and stuff. And where can people get that?
Yes. So it's a free ebook. Only one page is on what we've been talking about, which is removing your information from the top sites. All the rest of it, it's 36 pages long. All the rest of it is all about online privacy, internet security, our Google and Facebook tracking you if they are, how to figure that out and how to stop that. How to lock down your credit report. How to use temporary emails. Remember, I mentioned earlier about how somebody can use your email to hack into your accounts. Well, there's something called temporary emails, and I have links for those, and I explain how you use those. Anyway, free ebook. Find it at officerprivacy.com/ebook, EBOOK, and you can download that for free.
I actually found a lot of value out of that ebook and was impressed with it because I learned a lot of stuff about it and stuff I didn't think about. So, my daughter, I think this has been top of mind for me because my daughter we finally caved and got her a cell phone. And so she's in that world. I mean, she doesn't have the socials yet, but we're right at the cusp of where her information is going to get out there. And then we realized, well, my son's got an Xbox account, and although we don't allow him to engage verbally with people, stuff slips up. And so for me, I thought the ebook was really valuable. I also want to point out to you, just for full disclosure to everybody, that we started talking months and months ago and have had this interview on the books for a long time. And in the interim, you've come on as a sponsor of the Squad Room, and we're so beyond appreciative of the support you give us. But and just so people understand, the relationship there a little bit, but also, the very first conversation we had was any sponsorship I have to use the product, and I have to understand it, and I have to believe in it, which I do in this case, and that's why I invited you on the show. I invited you on specifically even as a quote even as a sponsor, because there was value to give to the audience in terms of learning about how to protect yourself online and that sort of stuff. And so I want to make sure that that's clear. But also, you have an offer for listeners of the Squad Room, where you're going to give them a free USB data blocker and a free month of monitoring if they sign up as listeners of the Squad Room, if they go through the link officerprivacy.com/the Squad Room. Right.
Correct.
And I think that's just a great offer. A free month gets you up and running and set up. And like I said, I've learned a lot through this process about the stuff that of mine that's out there. It's been a great reframe for me on, mindfulness about these kinds of things, and all the way down to passwords and how we protect ourselves and that sort of stuff. So, Pete, want to thank you for your time today and for what you do for cops. I think it's cool. I love it anytime I hear of a cop who goes out and uses the skills they learned on the job to then go out into the world in a second career. But I just think it's even cooler that you took those skills and are turning around and applying them directly back to the people who you served with for so long. So, thank you for that service too, in addition to the 25 years with Sacramento. So everybody can find you at officerprivacy.com/the Squad Room. And socials, give them the social address there real quick.
Yeah, we have Facebook and Instagram and Twitter as well, and we have links on the website for those.
Excellent. And look forward to seeing officer privacy grow and helping more officers and helping us all stay safe. So thanks for being here today, Pete.
Thank you very much, Garrett. Appreciate it.
All right. Thanks for listening to this episode with Pete James. It really is important stuff. Your online safety, your online privacy. We preach it to our kids. We all have a horror story of some kid being pulled or lured out of the house via social media. But we need to be mindful of the fact that even as adults, we can get sloppy with what kind of information we put out there for the public to see. And any of us who have any sort of social media footprint, including myself, risk putting stuff out there. We risk things when we fill out a credit application or when we sign up for a grocery store card. Some of those things can always be tracked. And we open ourselves to being included in databases we had no idea about. And, it's telling when you find your name and you find out pretty much every address you've ever lived at through a quick Google search without even trying. It should tell you how important this stuff is. Again, the link is officerprivacy.com/the Squad Room. You'll get a month of free monitoring and a free USB data blocker if you use the service. And if you don't, no skin off my back either. Again, they're great supporters of the show. They're fantastic. Pete is a great human being. He did this job for a long, long time. And so I just think there's a great value in just having that conversation. But also want to let you know that if you heard something you got out of this conversation that you think someone else needs to hear, please consider sharing this episode. And if you like the episode or you like the show in general, if you haven't already, why haven't you left a review, huh? I'm joking, of course, but it would be very appreciated if you left a review on the podcast player of your choice. Just takes a few seconds. And if you have an extra few seconds, please leave a comment with a review as well, because that really does help us expand the reach of the show, improve the show for our listeners, everything else. And such. So appreciate all the reviews that are out there. They're all fantastic. Lots of great stuff coming up in the weeks and months ahead. Make sure you're on our mailing list. Sign up at thesquadroom.net. Make sure you're on the Tactical Tuesday mailing list. You don't want to miss out on that. Great stuff getting sent out. Lots of great replies coming back. Tons of people have signed up for it. It's so much fun. I enjoy doing that as well. So make sure you're over on thesquadroom.net checking for updates there, because we send out exclusive stuff to that mailing list by email. All right, until next time, take care of each other and stay safe.